Hello and welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Media. I am your sometimes host, Emily, and continuing in our awards season coverage, today we are going to be talking about Hamnet. Hamnet is the new film by filmmaker Chloe Zhao, who you may know for other films that she's done, like Nomadland and Eternals. And this time, she has chosen to bring her talents to adapting Maggie O'Farrell's novel Hamnet, a work of semi-historical fiction, maybe truth, covering the life of Shakespeare's wife, Anne Hathaway, as well as several of Shakespeare's children. So, before we get too much further into anything, I want to sort of talk a little bit about Hamnet's narrative and why it's so interesting that Chloe Zhao chose to adapt it and went about it in the way that she did. Hamnet is a very challenging story. The story of the novel and the story that the film is equally trying to tell is about the loss of Shakespeare and Anne Hathaway's son, Hamnet, which is alleged to have been the real-life inspiration behind portions of the writing of Hamlet, the play. Shakespeare's life is not super well documented, neither is the life of Anne Hathaway, and we don't know how much of this is true. It's not intended to be a 100% true-to-life biography about these events that happened or exactly why they may have happened, but rather an artistic interpretation of some real-life events that we did know happened to tell a story about grief, about loss, and about understanding in relationships. Similarly, and what may be challenging for some viewers based on the premise, is that Shakespeare is at best a secondary character in this narrative. He's not even directly addressed as being who he is until the 11th hour of this film at the very, very end. This is very much a story about Anne Hathaway, who is here renamed to Agnes and will be referred to as such throughout the rest of the review. Agnes is the central character in this narrative. The loss that the couple experiences is really told to us through her perspective. And in fact, a lack of her husband's perspective is an intentional plot point. We are kept away from knowing what was going on with the Shakespeare character in this movie. His perspective, his experiences, all of those things are things that are at best tertiary to this film's interest from a narrative perspective, which can be really challenging to viewers who saw the title and the premise and assumed that they were going to be watching a movie about Shakespeare. This isn't a movie about Shakespeare. This is a movie about Agnes, her relationship with her husband, and her relationship with her children. And once you get on the movie's level about that, it really is a moving and excellent piece of character work, if a little bit plotting, a little bit slow, and a little bit predictable. Part of the issue that I had with this film, despite it being excellent, and I will sing its praises momentarily, but something I want to just sort of say about it before I move on, is that this film is both slow and you kind of know where it's going from the outset. As soon as we meet the players and we know the title of the movie, and especially once certain plot elements are introduced, it's not exactly difficult to see where this movie is going, and that doesn't feel unintentional. On some level, from a structural standpoint, this movie is really a 90-minute build-up to a 25-minute sequence towards the end that pays off pretty much everything that it was doing. And while that works and the sequence in question is moving and brilliant and bleeds with life in the way that you would want it to, it does sometimes leave the movie feeling a little bit methodical and making me wish that we could just move on from certain things because we sort of get the idea of what we're supposed to draw from them. That being said, it's not like the movie is bad. It's an excellent portrayal of a relationship, of the building of a family, and how difficult it can be to love someone who you don't fully understand. And I think that that's what makes this movie so interesting, is the complexity that we get to see in Agnes and Will's relationship from Agnes's perspective. Shakespeare has been studied to death, right? He's a guy that we know a lot about and that people have had endless thoughts about the works of. Getting his internality in this film would not be interesting. Instead, we get to see Shakespeare from the perspective of someone who is actively being denied access to his internality. Agnes doesn't always understand everything that's going on with her husband. In fact, many of his behaviors throughout the film frustrate her endlessly. She's focused on trying to be a good mother, on trying to uphold the legacy of her own mother, and trying to take care of her children when her husband is as troubled and flaky as he is. All of these themes lead us to Agnes being a character who is fascinating. She is deeply emotional, deeply in touch with her environment, and deeply dedicated to the things that she cares about, sometimes to the detriment of her relationship because she sees her and her husband as having different priorities. And ultimately, the narrative arc of the movie is the two of them coming to understand their views of each other. Will coming to understand that his wife isn't always going to know exactly what he's thinking, and sometimes that means she will misunderstand him, or that she won't get what he's doing, but he's going to keep trying to portray those things even when they don't come easily to him. And Agnes finding a way to have grace for the things in life that are outside of herself, trying to develop a broader perspective and realize that her own pain does not mean that there isn't pain in other people. And it winds up being this fascinating, complex relationship dynamic. Agnes and Will wind up being fantastic, layered characters who are treated with every molecule of respect that you would want them to be, anchored by two fantastic performances by Jessie Buckley and Paul Mescal as Agnes and Will, respectively. The acting is what, to me, sells this movie even through its slower moments. Every scene with Agnes carries this fantastic gravitas because she's so emotional in a good way, not in the way that we sometimes think of women as being written as overly emotional, but Agnes feels so much throughout this movie, and it's fantastic to get to see so much of that coming through in the script. And I have to attribute part of that to Chloe Zhao's talent as a filmmaker, because this movie, from a aesthetic, from a technical perspective, is put together brilliantly. Every scene pops with these beautiful shades of green and red and brown. It feels so earthy and real and rooted in reality, and it is brilliant. When it comes to the actual art of filmmaking, Chloe Zhao is just such a talent from a creative standpoint. She's excellent, and I was super impressed by it. Even through this movie's slower and more predictable parts, I never cease to be impressed with the way that Zhao puts scenes together, with the way that Zhao directs her actors, and with the things that the actors bring to the script in the first place. I think Jessie Buckley gave this amazing, emotionally involved, huge performance as Agnes, but I do also think, despite not being the centerpiece of the movie, Paul Mescal gives an excellent performance as William Shakespeare, capturing the complexity and the struggles and the disjointedness of the bard as we understand him from a historical perspective as best as possible. Those are the things that I think the movie did well, but I do have to bag on it a little more for some of its issues before we can move on to the sort of recommendation and the Oscar talk about this movie. While I think it was excellent, and while I think it does a lot of things well, this movie does struggle a little bit here and there with coming off either way overtly cheesy or just being so slow. As I mentioned, anyone with even a tangential knowledge of this real story, that Shakespeare has a son whose name is Hamnet. He has 3 kids. Hamnet winds up dying, and Hamlet, the play, is written shortly thereafter, right? We know that's going to happen. We know that's going to happen so much that the movie is named Hamnet. We know that this story critically involves him in some way. And so when we're shown scene after scene after scene of what is essentially menial day-to-day life with Agnes and her children, it winds up being a little bit frustrating because we know where this story is going. We don't need to spin these wheels because we know what's going to happen. And after the 3rd or 4th time that it happens, it just gets methodical and repetitive in a way that winds up feeling slightly clunky and frustrating to watch. As well, when this movie moves into its 3rd act, after Hamnet's death, and fully leans into the, right, this is William Shakespeare and we're going to do William Shakespeare things, it gets dicey in a way that feels off to a certain extent. The following thing that I'm going to describe is a spoiler, so I would suggest that you skip ahead to whatever time code is on screen. Sorry for giving you an editing job, Max, but if you could just give people an avenue to skip this quick spoiler. There's a sequence in this movie towards the end, after the death of Hamnet, where William Shakespeare is, having written Hamlet, he's separated from his wife, and he is having difficulty getting his actors to perform the play in the way that he wants. And there is a sequence in which he goes out to a dockside and reads a fair portion of the to be or not to be monologue from Hamlet directly into the camera while contemplating whether or not to commit suicide. And it's a good scene. I think Mescal brought a lot of gravity to it, but I couldn't help but feel a little off-put by it. It's the moment in the film that feels like it jumps the shark for me. It goes from being a drama about these people, a work of historical fiction that takes something that may have happened and turns it into a very poignant narrative about grief and about connection, and layers it with this really overt and on-the-nose scene of significance that just took me out of the illusion that was being created by the fiction, if that makes sense. And this is not the only scene in the movie that's guilty of it. Similarly, the first time that William Shakespeare's name is said directly on screen in this film comes in a pretty baffling sequence where Agnes and her brother wind up going to London to see the production of Hamlet when it first happens, and they go looking for Will, and they go to the apartment building, or the building where he's staying. He has an apartment in the attic, and someone leans out of the window and goes, "Who are you looking for?" And they look, again, directly into the camera and go, "William Shakespeare." And I don't know, it just feels a bit much. It takes me out of what is otherwise a very grounded and moving film and reminds me that this is still a movie that's going to do a lot of overt referencing, and I kind of wish that they had let off the gas a little bit on that front. But ultimately, it doesn't matter that much. It's not a deal breaker, it's just a minor frustration that I have with an otherwise excellent, if pretty slow, movie that does a lot of things right. Regardless of your opinion on the actual narrative of the film or its pacing or whatever, it's pretty difficult to deny that Chloe Zhao is an extremely talented filmmaker, and she brings her A game to this movie alongside two fantastic actors giving it their all in these performances. So ultimately, if you're into these types of movies, you'll probably enjoy Hamnet. But if you're the type of person who doesn't often go for the very intimate drama style of movies, I don't know that Hamnet is going to satiate you in the way that something like Sentimental Value is going to. Ultimately, though, this film still carries my recommendation. I think it was good enough to be worth your time, and if you are the type of person who's interested in these sorts of films, I would certainly recommend going out and giving it a watch. I think you will wind up enjoying yourself. Now we get to the part of the video where I'm going to talk about this movie's road through awards season from where it already is. This movie is essentially already a lock for a Best Picture nomination. Similar to other films like One Battle After Another or Sentimental Value, it would take a wild swing in momentum for this movie to somehow not get nominated. It almost certainly will, and it does deserve it. It's a movie that demonstrates Zhao's expertise at her craft and tells a compelling and moving narrative to boot. So, no reason for it to not be nominated for Best Picture. It likely will. In other categories, Hamnet is almost certainly a lock for the cinematography category. It would be almost a sham if it wasn't. There are some sequences, especially towards the end of this film, when we actually get to see Hamlet performed that are beautiful. The way that the sets that they build, although that is an anachronism, the real Shakespeare players probably wouldn't have performed with sets like the ones that we see in the movie. It doesn't really matter because they look great. They add a sense of really surreal, not quite realism, but it's the impression of watching something that was made to look a little bit fake that's just fascinating. It's beautiful from an aesthetic perspective, and I think that a cinematography nom is definitely in the cards for this movie, alongside probably a Best Director nomination for Chloe Zhao, which she earned every bit of through every single scene in this movie. From an acting perspective, we will probably also see both Buckley and Mescal nominated for lead actress and supporting actor respectively, and Buckley, I would say, has a pretty good shot at taking home the gold this year. There are so many scenes of Agnes in this movie where she gets to have these explosive moments of emotion that are just jaw-dropping. And Jessie Buckley leaves nothing to the imagination for the audience. She brings out every millimeter of talent that she can muster, and it is amazing. I had never really seen anything that Jessie Buckley was in prior to this, but now she is an actress that I know is going to bring it in a role where she can. So, off the back of a single performance, this actress has proved herself to me as someone with serious star power, and if that's not worthy of a Best Actress win, it's hard to say what is. Buckley is likely to take home the gold. Mescal is in a bit of a trickier situation. As I've mentioned previously, supporting actor is a pretty tough category to be in, pretty much ever, but especially this year, going up against people like Stellan Skarsgård, Benicio del Toro, Sean Penn, whoever else happens to get nominated. It's just never a situation that I would really be super enthused to be in, and ultimately, I do think that Skarsgård is a bit more likely to take the gold home than Mescal is, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Paul Mescal take it home because he does do really great at capturing the complexities of the character that he was given to work with. I don't remember if this is something that I said on Million Dollar Media as a channel, but something I feel about Paul Mescal is that he is not a movie star. He's a capital A actor, and there is a big difference. Not every performer is suited to play every type of role, and watching Gladiator 2 last year, what was very clear to me is that that was not the type of role that Paul Mescal is suited for. It's not what he's good at, and it wasn't making the best use of his talents. Hamnet, by contrast, is making the best use of his talents. It gives him such a dense and complex script to chew on, and gives him so many moments to really show off the nuance that he can really bring to the table as a performer. And I'm glad to see Hollywood as a sort of larger state recognize how to best use Paul Mescal rather than trying to crowbar him into roles where he just doesn't really fit. I think he did great here, and I think he has a real shot at supporting actor, even if I would say that Skarsgård is still a bit more likely to take home the gold relative to him. Beyond that, this movie is competing in the extremely competitive adapted screenplay category this year, against movies like One Battle After Another, as well as various others. And that's a tough category to be in, but I wouldn't be super surprised to see Hamnet take home the win. The screenplay is littered with this extremely dense, flowery language that's just beautiful to listen to. It's really nice. And I think we've seen this in several films this year, to have a movie where the actual speaking, like the cadence of it, the language that they use, is just really good to listen to. That being said, from an accessibility standpoint, it is sometimes hard to parse what characters are saying in this movie because of the dialect of English that they're speaking, the accents, and some of the sound mixing. So that is a bit tricky. But from the majority of the writing that I understood, I thought it was really excellent, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Hamnet take home at least a nomination, if not a win in the screenplay category, although I think One Battle After Another probably still has its number. Beyond that, I don't know how much else we'll see Hamnet in for. There's a world where it could be production design off the back of some of the physical sets that were built for the Hamlet performance at the end of the movie. And while I do think those were excellent, compared to something like Frankenstein, it would be pretty difficult for this movie to punch in its weight class this year. So I don't know, even if it does get a nomination, I severely doubt that it'll be taking home a win. Beyond that, I don't think Hamnet shows up too many other places at the Academy Awards, but it's still certainly one of the biggest contenders when it comes to this year's awards season. The acting branch is never to be underestimated, and with two lightning bolt performances in the lead of this film, I think it stands a real shot at being one of this year's champions when it comes to the grander slate of awards taken home. And it's not like it doesn't deserve it. Hamnet is a moving and excellent picture of a lot of complex emotions that aren't going to be easy for everyone to deal with, but I think Zhao captures them in a really intimate and tender way that not a lot of filmmakers could really measure up to. So all of the clout that this movie is getting, despite my issues with it, it's certainly deserved. And it carries my recommendation. You should, if you think it's the type of movie you'll like, give this one a watch. Beyond that, I don't have too much more, so thank you guys so much for watching and for supporting Million Dollar Media. We're looking forward to doing even bigger and better things in 2026 for you all. Please go ahead and like this video. Leave me a comment if you think my opinions were horrible, or if I got some portion of Shakespeare's actual history wrong. Feel free to correct me with an actually and a nerd emoji and everything. Subscribe to our channel if you want to hear more videos like this. Subscribe to our Patreon if you want Max to be able to order something nice off of DoorDash. And keep watching movies and keep watching our videos. Thank you.